Hey everybody, this is Lukas Korff bringing you another episode of Overcomers. Not just a victim, not just a survivor, but an overcomer. Where the Bible says they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the power of their testimony. Today it's awesome to welcome Joe Engelbrecht, also well known as Joe Black. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to hear what's going to come out today.
Me too. Yeah.
Me too, I dig that. The first question we want to ask you today is, what is the worst thing that ever happened to you?
I met this guy. He was this story about David and Jonathan. You know? So I met my Jonathan named Vaughn when I was 15, 16 years old, and we were these best mates through high school. He was actually the inspiration behind Be That Guy, why I started this campaign of mine, being that person for someone else. And in my matric year 2000, on the 28th of January, I was sitting at home with my band rehearsing. It was 3 o'clock at night. Vaughn drove past and they saw we were still awake, so they pretended to be burglars. Now, long story short is, in a freak accident, my best friend died that night in my arms. And I remember that was the worst feeling ever, losing your best friend. But what made it worse, I say, that's the night I lost God as well. Because the next morning, a lady just stopped randomly at our house. And she said, God was here last night. And that shook me, because I knew something happened. Because no one knew Vaughn had died. This was 3 a.m. This lady stopped there at 7. And she walked exactly to the tree where he died. And she stood there and she said, God stood here last night. And he came and plucked his most beautiful flower. And in a moment, I just lost it. And I said, do you know what? God came and stole something from me. He came and took my most prized possession, the person closest to me. So I think you take your God and please leave. We don't need you here. And that started a point in my life where I decided not to believe in God. I decided that he doesn't exist to me. 3 days later, or 2 days later, police arrested us. And they opened a murder case, a murder dossier against us, because the way he died was so unnatural. And this ran for 6 years against me. So in 2006, I just got a phone call which said, listen guys, it was a freak accident, so there's no murder charges. But what made it worse is that I made peace already, that I said, I'm not going to jail for something that I didn't do. I prepped my family. I told them I don't have depression or anything, but I will commit suicide if they're going to take me to jail for killing my best friend or for hurting him. And I think that's what it started the process of where I am today.
But in that, and I'm seeing you go through that, I see you as a young man going through that setup. And then, sometimes people try and say cute things to make us feel better. Yeah. In that setup, and as you're speaking, I can feel, how long ago was that?
This was now 21 years this year.
And it's still so fresh, but yet you overcame it.
I'm lying. Sorry, it's 17 years.
17 years.
Yeah, you got my
so
dates wrong.
What I want to ask you, and I think this is what I want to get through to the viewers, is how did you overcome that?
One answer, I could say by meeting God. But I'm one of the fortunate guys. I didn't meet him in church. I didn't meet him somewhere else. I met him alone. And I had this idea God does not exist, because I came out of a home where I had a bad upbringing with stepfathers and stuff like that. And I remember one scenario. I was 7 years old and my stepfather hit my mother. And she said, to protect us, go to the room and go pray. And I remember running into the room and I said, Jesus, please help make it stop. And it didn't stop. And I remember another incident when I was 13, I stabbed my stepbrother with a knife and he was bleeding out. And I remember praying, Jesus, please help him, please help him. He didn't arrive. But luckily my stepbrother made it, he's cool now. I remember that night when Vaughn died, I held out maybe 50 times. God, please help, this can't be happening. So to me, he was dead, because from the age, since I can remember, he never pitched. So at the age of 25, I was lured into a trap I was going on a camp with a bunch of friends. And while I was at this camp, and I found out it was a church camp, I told these guys, I don't do church camps. So just exclude me from this whole thing. And I was standing outside by the fire, and I still had a drink in my hand, and I had about 3 or 4 grams of cocaine in my pocket. And I overheard a story of the prodigal son. And while this guy was talking about that, I just felt this urge, I want to be that son. This is what I need, but it must be fake. And the more he's talking, and I'm not an emotional guy, or I wasn't, something started choking up. And I just called that guy very abruptly, and I said, listen, do you believe the nonsense you're talking? And he says, no, he believes it with his whole heart. And I said, that's enough. And I just threw my drink in the fire, emptied out my pockets. And as I walked away, he said, can I pray? And I said, no one prays for me. And I went to my room, and that's where I encountered God, where everything that happened, everything that I hated God for, came and made sense, where he revealed himself. I started quoting scriptures that are out of a book that I've never read. Scenarios where Vaughn was dead, where I keep on telling myself in my head, like, I just want to tell you, I was there, but I didn't take life. I'm a giver of life. And that is how God manifested himself to me. And I think that is the day where I can truly say a 180-degree turn in my life, that I'm actually disappointed that I missed 25 years of God, just through a couple of scenarios that pushed me away.
That's so awesome, because you were alone in your room, called out to God.
It was the first time I actually made a bargain where I said, I'm going to give you tonight, and this is your time to grab in, you know. If you miss tonight, if you don't pitch, you never pitched when I prayed, never arrived when I called. Tonight I'm asking again, come, and if you don't pitch, I'm off the market tomorrow again. So, because I knew the next morning I'd wake up with a craving for drugs, or a craving for a drink. I used to be an alcoholic, and the next morning I woke up, and it's now been 10 years that I've been drug-free, sober, without a craving for anything.
That's actually such a powerful, simplistic turn to God. If you had a moment to share advice regarding life, this life, what would your advice be?
Well, see, what I do is I tour the whole country looking for Joe, who's still on the benches, looking for Joe who's 13, 7, 18 years old. And my message would be, I want to be someone that makes everyone feel like a someone. I want to be that guy to someone else, the way Vaughn was to me, the way Jesus was to me when I needed him most. Because we don't know who's fighting what battle. We don't know who's where in their life, to make a difference and not just talk about it, not just be people who say we're going to change the world, but actually doers. And how you do it is just by a simple smile. You start lifting people up, encouraging people. So I'd reckon my motto, which I live by, is be someone who makes everyone feel like a someone.
Be someone who makes everyone feel like a someone. I want to encourage you today. I want to remind you also to love God, to love people, to love life, and to live a life worthy of a legacy. Take what you have heard today, embrace it, accept it, stand for it, and be that guy.
Thanks, Tim.
Pleasure.